Steve, great to have you, man. I haven't interviewed anybody with your background, and I'm very much looking forward to it because I think there's this uniqueness, man. There's a lot of people I think with a similar background that don't necessarily have the experience or the interest in the hunting world that you do. So I'm super pumped to dive in to a bunch of those subjects. But your background is also, because I'm not a military guy and I am not from that world, it's a little bit of an enigma to me. So I'm going to let you do just a brief intro who Steve Messer is.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Cliff. I really appreciate it. So, real quickly, I grew up like a lot of American boys, watching my heroes on TV. And when I was a kid, my mom let me stay home from school in California. We lived in California at the time, out on a 1,000-acre ranch. And I got to watch the astronauts land in the ocean, and these guys in black suits would get the astronauts out of the capsules, and those were the underwater demolition team frogmen. And I'm like, I got the ultimate GI Joe kit where you could put an Alka-Seltzer tab in the scuba bottles in the bathtub.
Sure.
That kind of set my fantasies in motion. And after I got out of high school, I joined the Navy. I grew up most of my older childhood years with a Marlin 22 lever action. And I got pretty good at shooting the insulators off of telephone poles, so I got in trouble. I went into teams, and I went in the Navy in 1984, went through SEAL training in 1986, went to SEAL Team 2, retired from the teams after about 21 years. Served on SEAL Team 2, SEAL Team 8, Naval Special Warfare Development Group, was a Navy survival, evasion, resistance, and escape instructor in Brunswick, Maine. Did a lot of cold weather survival training up there, did a lot of mountain warfare operations in the teams. And after I retired from active duty, I went civilian. And the reason I retired was because I had two teenage boys that needed me at home to take them hunting and help raise them as they got into their teenage years. And then I did some contract work and got hired by the federal government again, ran the Coast Guard Special Mission Training Center tactical program at Camp Lejeune on the close quarter combat side, and then the precision marksman side, and then got another federal appointment to a position back at Dev Group as a deputy range and simulations officer there. And I've been a hunter my entire life. And my CO at SEAL Team 8 used to accuse me of running the SEAL Team 8 rod and gun club because I tried to take the snipers out. Some of these guys have never put their crosshairs on anything alive and moving in their entire lives,
Sure.
right? And after when 9/11 hit, that's where I was. And I was on a trip with my snipers, and I went and talked to the operations officer at the base we were training at. I said, hey, sir, how about letting us go back into the impact area and work on some live game? And we went and got tags that we needed from the game wardens, and it was the first time that some guys had shot a live animal. And then not long after that, they were deployed into Afghanistan.
Sure.
with sniper rifles. So that's my background. And
it sounds like most of your life you've been sitting on your ass, man.
I've been accused of that too.
No, dude, it's awesome. But that last part is really intriguing to me, Steve. So let's talk about that, because I've guided, like I vividly remember several times in my life. I used to, before I would, anytime I've ever booked hunts, I get information sheets on people, and there's like practical reasons for this, right? It would be, their weight, height, age, so I knew, what horse to put them on, stuff like that. But, there's some other information in there I'd gather. I see their names, and then I'll admit almost all the hunters I've ever had come into my businesses, I Google them. I get a little background on them just to kind of,
Sure.
just it's good to kind of know, what people are coming or whatever.
Absolutely.
And I've had several guys, when I Googled them, I looked up their background, and it was, a lot of the same, similar, if at least from my perspective, from probably a fairly naive perspective, similar background to you, probably in the same, some of the same sort of things, which to me is real impressive, particularly from like a firearm perspective and just like, being out there in the wilderness. And I don't mean this in a derogatory way at all, but I've always several times I've realized when they come, that background doesn't always translate into hunting. Like hunting is a different skill set. Like anytime a guy who's been around firearms a lot is a guide, you know it because you could tell a minute the guy, just like the safety stuff and all of that. So that's always
Sure.
clear. But then when you get several of them, I've been out guide them. I'm like, oh, okay. Like I was naive to the fact that guy is very experienced and trained in what he's been doing, but this is like the first time he's gone hunting. And obviously there's some crossover, but a lot of times not as much as I thought. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I didn't know if you had any. It just kind of when you said that I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Like a lot of these guys are going through a lot of training, but they haven't necessarily been out there and shot at anything yet.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. It's absolutely true. When, let's see, it was, I think, early 90s, we actually went to a guide school in the Bitterroot, run by, I think it was Wally York and Sons.
Oh, okay.
And yeah. And that was the first time that I'd ever carried a rifle on horseback.
Oh, that's
And
cool.
that's, and I learned that you know how you mature and you go through different phases in life, and you think you know everything when you're younger, and you don't. In reality, you don't know shit.
Yeah, sure.
And when I got around those guys, I'm like, these guys know these mountains. And one of the things I learned that was a skill that I use pretty much forevermore and still do is navigating without a compass, just using a map and an altimeter. Where the terrain is steep, then the terrain features are sharp enough and steep enough. But I learned that, I've hunted whitetail, and killed a lot of whitetail in my life, but I've never hunted the wapiti,
Yeah,
or
sure.
or bear hunted. And these guys have got it dialed in.
Yeah, well, they've been in the region and those sort of things, so they get it dialed pretty good. Um,
Yeah, yeah. And if you can put your ego aside and learn from somebody like that, then you start skill stacking.
Yeah, dude, I think that's a good point. And that's kind of what I was trying to get at, Steve. Is like because I feel the same way. Like there's, I'll go. I mean, I've done a few shooting courses and stuff, and I'll go do shooting courses with a military guy. And of course, in the back of my head, I'm thinking like, well, like a bunch of this stuff's not going to apply to what I do because the hunter. You know what I mean? But then you start doing it, and you're like, oh yeah, like some of this stuff is good shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's you
absolutely.
got to have an open mind. Like, I think, it exactly because then you can compound and stack them,
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But no, it's good stuff, man. Oh, you know what I got to ask you. This is
Sure.
a little bit off track cuz we're going to dive into the hunting stuff. But I asked early on, Steve, you got a bucket list hunt or adventure?
Yes. I
Let's
want to
hear it.
finish an adventure that I started I think it was in 1994, and I never got to finish. I actually went up to the northern slope of Alaska with my uncle and his good buddy, and we had an airboat. And as you know, up in Alaska, if it's still the same, you can't hunt with a rifle within a 5 mile corridor of the pipeline. And we drove all the way up to Prudhoe Bay to see that. Then came about 50 miles south. I think we were hunting off the Ivashak River, put the airboat in, and it was getting towards the end of our hunt, and that's where I got my first and only long range kill. It's like I killed a caribou at about a little over 700 yards with a 300 Win Mag with my war gun. I actually was in an alert status but on leave, and I went on the hunting trip with my government gun just to use it in the field,
Sure.
and got that caribou. And we headed south. We were going down to hunt moose, I think in Koyukuk River Basin. And we stopped in Coldfoot, Alaska at this wilderness truck stop. And I told my uncle, I said, man, don't call the wife while you're here. I'm not calling mine. I don't want I don't want to deal with any drama from home.
Sure.
Let's not F up a good trip, right?
Yeah.
So he goes into the gas station in Coldfoot, and he comes back out and he goes, hey, dude, you got a phone call. I looked at him like, dude, I told you not to call your wife. He goes, I didn't. He goes, it's for you. I said, no, it's not. Go in and get on the phone. He comes back out and he goes, it's you. It's work related. Long story short, a friend of mine was fishing in Kodiak. He found me and he goes, hey, dude, we're launching. you gotta fly home now.
Oh, I
And
got you.
I had my uncle drive me back to Fairbanks, and so my trip to kill a moose got interrupted. I did have a big caribou, big caribou, and that's on my bucket list. Number one on my bucket list is to finish up the double play, finish
Nice.
up the caribou and the moose hunt on the same trip, and then number three would be brown bear and Kodiak.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, yeah. Do that. I almost feel like that's better because you got like a taste of it. So now you just got to go finish it up. You know what I mean? I
It
like
was
that.
so cool on the northern slope, man, of fishing and catching these beautiful
Sure.
grayling and Arctic char and glassing for caribou. And the three bulls that we saw were on the day before the last morning, and we saw them right before dusk. And then we stalked up, and about the closest we could get to them was about 700-800 yards. And otherwise, I never would have taken a shot that far away.
Yeah. No, it's a beautiful Alaska's a beautiful place, man. Cliff's Hunter, I created this knife from iteration in the field. It has been modified and perfected for the backcountry use case. It is my belief that in terms of all-around knives, this is the last knife that an elk hunter, mule deer hunter, sheep hunter, goat hunter will need to buy. Go check it out on my website, pursuitwithcliff.com. In the top right, click shop, then Cliff's Hunter. All the details are there. I always struggle a little bit with it professionally because the logistics up there is just a major pain in the ass. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? But there's nothing.
Yeah.
There's nowhere else. There's nowhere else like it. You know, in terms of, you know, like you're saying, just the feeling of it's like the last frontier of kind of
And
Western
seeing the
hunting.
rivers run north
Oh yeah,
from the it was like, wow, this is so cool. It's
yeah.
like this is God's country up here. Was so the Northern Lights and everything about it was just it was the experience of a lifetime for me.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it's a good spot, man. Um, Something in there that I think is a good point for us to talk about a little bit is, man, with all your background, your 600, 700 yard shot, that's still far from your perspective.
I won't do it now. And I'll say this: the only reason I did it then is because it was the last morning, and I was trained at the peak of my game. And I was
Yeah,
a Dev
yeah,
Group sniper. I was on top of my game. I shot my long gun almost every single work day
yeah.
for score, almost every single work day because my commander counted on me to be able to make a shot when the shot needed to be made. So that was a different ball game. But now I focus more and train people focusing on surgical marksmanship. And what I mean by surgical marksmanship is understanding that there's two very important concepts in marksmanship that a lot of guys miss, and it's accuracy and precision. Accuracy comes from the human element, and precision comes from the system that we use. And our gun system basically consists of the ammunition, the optic, and the rifle itself. And I didn't invent that concept. I learned it from Brian Litz when I had to modernize. I was charged with modernizing a program for the Coast Guard around 2011, 2012 timeframe, and I bought every book and DVD I could. Even though I have years of experience as a sniper, I said I, I'm charged with updating this curriculum. I need to validate everything that I think I know about marksmanship from the Marine Corps, the Army, famous competition shooters, guys, they're champions, true champions like David Tubb, Olympic champions like Lanny Basham, ballistic scientists like Brian Litz, and this concept I discovered about accuracy and precision from Brian. I did a deep dive on it, and with these Coast Guard kids I was training at the time, it enabled me to reach through to them and teach them that if they can identify a problem with the fundamentals of marksmanship or a problem with the weapon system, they can accelerate their learning curve way faster than normal. And accuracy is about the fundamentals of marksmanship. And I teach 5 fundamentals: position, aiming, breathing, trigger control, and follow through. And there's very detailed elements that go into each one of those fundamentals. And if you look at like an Olympic champion shooter, these guys go to the Olympics and they shoot for gold medal, hopefully, But at that level, the reason that they're so much better shooters than we are with the fundamentals is because they've mastered the fundamentals at a higher level, right? And at that level, their performance is won by whoever has the best mental performance, the self-image, the subconscious performance, and the conscious thoughts.
Yeah,
And
because they got
so,
everything else they got down so good that's like the defining factors, that small amount. Which
yeah,
for me as a hunter, for other hunters, it's probably fundamentals outweigh outweigh that
yeah,
part.
yeah. And here's a perfect example. I've got a friend in Alaska who's in Washington State yesterday, and he was trying to zero a brand new AR-15. It was a budget gun. He's having issues on the range, and he called me. He's texting me what's going on. I said, dude, it's hard for me to diagnose from a distance like this, but you have to identify whether you've got an accuracy problem or a precision problem with the gun. And if you don't identify which issue you're having because you don't know the difference, you could end up chasing bullets all over the place and never establish a baseline zero.
Yeah. It's really and dude, we could take this 1,000 different ways, but it's interesting you say that, Steve, because I this takes me back to a long time. I mean, it's probably been maybe 15 years ago I started to reload, for
Yeah.
myself. And you know what I realized? I mean, it's embarrassing to say this, but it took me like 6 months to figure out that all this testing I thought I was doing with my reloads was actually just because I couldn't do what you're saying. Like I would I would change the powder a little bit. I'd change everything slightly, and I thought I had one variable, but the dominant variable was still always me. And so I mean, I
Yeah.
probably spent $10,000 on ammo and shit just because I didn't have anybody to tell me that. And finally I got a
Yeah.
little help, and I figured out like, oh, okay, this matters, because I get what you're saying. Is like we can all we all tend to manifest that we're actually accurate. You know what I mean? And it's not always the case.
Yeah. And so one of the first things I do with a hunter, if I'm working with a hunter, is to take him to the 100-yard line and have him shoot zeros. If the bench rest is his preferred position, let's say instead of prone, we're going to go to the bench rest and we're going to spend some time, and I'm going to see how he groups and how consistent he is, because consistency in applying the fundamentals is the key to accuracy. And if he can't shoot accurately, he's either got a problem with himself, with his performance, or the gun. So once those two are separated, if I think it's his gun, I'll put my rifle in front of him, and he might have to adjust for eye relief or something like that, but I know that my gun is dialed in. And then I can get him to see that it's a problem with his application of fundamentals. So we work on dialing in his consistency, because establishing that baseline is critical no matter what position that you're going to shoot from. If you're going to shoot off of shooting sticks, if you're going to shoot off of a tripod, bipod, whatever, you have to have confidence in your baseline zero and be able to apply that confidence consistently.
Right. And it's so it's I mean, it's an interesting subject, man. Like what do you find, like what are the big ones for hunters? Are there, I mean, let's say, I mean, me and you have never shot together, Steve, and I wouldn't
Yeah.
say, I mean, I don't need to dive into it because I got a bunch of content out there. Like in general, I'm very conservative. Like when I'm
Yeah.
guiding guys, we try, if I can get a guy below 300 yards, like I try to do it. Rarely even if a guy tells me he's good at 600-700 yards, we're still gonna get sub 400 yards. And then
Sure.
me personally, I like to kill elk at 250, 300 yards. You know what I mean? So
Absolutely.
and I wouldn't call
All day
it,
long.
and I'd say, like, if we went and shot in a more range environment, you'd probably view me as just like a average guy. You know what I mean? What do you
Sure.
what are probably the biggest, like, fundamental things that I'm missing?
So again, it has to do with whether you're talking in terms of accuracy or precision, because the issues I see most commonly are with accuracy, on the accuracy side. If it's on the precision side, a guy may show up to the range with a Magnum rifle, or let's say even a good quality 308, a match grade 308, but he's underscoped, right? Um, and so the system has to be, my number one rule is to know what your priorities are. What are you going after? What um, what kind of game are you going after? And go for overmatch. Have a little bit more scope than you think you're going to need, and a little bit more caliber than you're going to need. So getting back to those problems, though, if I say that one of the biggest problems is for the shooter himself not understanding that there is those two separate concepts, and trying to diagnose problems. It would be like
Yeah,
trying to
yeah,
have a doctor diagnose you over the phone.
yeah, I got you. And just so I understand, Steve, when you say accuracy and precision, is the line between the person and the equipment? Is it the same line that we're talking about? Okay, so precision, you're talking about the equipment they have. So let's break that down, man.
Yeah,
On the equipment front, because I'm not familiar, or I may be unfamiliar with your definition of like overscoped and that term.
right.
Like, what are on the equipment front? Just your average hunter who's got a $1,500 rifle setup, a couple $1,000 rifle setup. What are the issues that you see there?
Typically, if he's got a quality system, he's got the right ammo, he's got the right rifle, and he's got the right optic on the rifle to be able to clearly see, make a good vital zone shot at 300 yards, say. Then the issues that I typically see is consistency in shooting at anything other than a bench rest position. If we transition to tripod, for example, or sticks, or prone with a bipod. And one of the things I've discovered is that I did so much prone shooting. I did a lot of competition shooting when I was active duty. Is that I became too reliant on my bipod because we had a flat range that we went to, and we didn't do enough unconventional position shooting, except unless we were preparing for a sniper competition or something like that. So what I'll see on the range is that a guy can shoot a tight group, 3-round group, 5-round group at 100 yards, and then things start opening up past 100. And they typically can't pinpoint exactly what's causing things to open up. Or if we go to a different position, now he didn't understand before that he's probably going to have a zero change when he's shooting from the sitting position off of a tripod.
Right.
Or he doesn't know how to make an offhand shot. And you know how often when you're hunting, even elk. I
Sure.
mean, my son killed an elk last fall, and he shot 50 yards away offhand.
Right.
Right, one shot took it down, and so it's a combination of the fundamentals of aiming or position, aiming, breathing, trigger control, and follow through. And when it comes to position, is getting that experience in other than shooting off of a bench, which you're not going to have, as you know, out in the
Sure.
field.
Yeah, yeah, sure. Sure. What do you like the because I always struggle with this one, Steve. What's the best way for a guy to practice that? Is it just, the different positions and that sort of thing? Are you a believer in dry firing, or are you a believer in just getting somewhere where you can do it, out in the, national forest somewhere? Like, what's your thoughts?
So I'm a big believer in dry fire and rehearsal and visualization and preparation. Okay. So, number one rule, of course, when doing any kind of dry fire rehearsal is safety. You never have live ammunition ever
Sure.
anywhere around your gun if you're doing dry fire training, because there's too many things that can go wrong. We just lost a retired fire chief here in Knoxville last Wednesday. He was 60 years old, and he was driving someplace. There was two, I don't know the details of it. There was two passengers in the truck in the seat behind him in his truck, and one of them had a negligent discharge with a pistol and it killed him. He had just retired from the fire department. He was 60 years old. And so that's why I say, and I could go on a rant about that. There's a
Sure.
violation of every single safety protocol and safety rule. But that's the number one thing. I just want to get that out of the way, is that safety matters.
Yeah, yeah.
And
And I think it's a good point, Steve. And I think sometimes
yeah,
because I'm a big proponent of dry firing. I don't pound it in
yeah,
enough. Like I think the way you put it is like I always tell people like, obviously make sure you don't have any, you don't have the gun, the standard stuff. But if
sure.
the not having any ammo around. I mean, if you have a Tika hunting rifle, like don't dry fire in your living room and have a magazine that's got rounds in it. Because your kid might come in to talk to you, and now you reach over and grab the mag that has live rounds in it, and you're not paying attention. It's um it's a big deal. I mean, you can't make a mistake. So it's a good point. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. So I keep my live ammo in my range area where I've got all of my live rounds and my range equipment, and I use snap caps, okay, because I do need to know how to load my magazine in the dark if I need to. I need to know how to get a round out of the chamber safely, and they're the next best thing to live fire training is dry fire training and going through the motions and rehearsing how you're going to hunt in the field. The unique thing about elk hunting is that none of us know what kind of final firing position we're going to have when we see that big bull,
Right.
right? Or a cow, even if we got a cow tag. And so you kind of have to look at it and say, all right, I need to know how to shoot offhand. I need to know how to shoot prone. Prone if the terrain permits. Out west, there's some places where you can shoot comfortably from a prone position,
Sure.
but chances are, more likely than not, you're going to have too much brush on the ground to shoot prone. So you got to understand how and have practice how to shoot from the sitting position. I like to use a tripod and an Arca rail. That's my favorite thing.
Yeah.
And I stay in shape in the off season. I work hard before the season opens to make sure that I can try and keep up with my 30-year-old kid.
Sure.
At altitude. I'll be 62 this summer, right? And I'm glad that I can still get up in the hills and hoof it, right? And so I don't mind carrying a tripod. But it's also good if you use shooting sticks, you got to practice with them. And if
Yeah.
you can't go to a live fire range, you should dry fire. And you should dry fire and train and rehearse with your equipment as you're going to carry it and use it in the field dry, so that when you go to the range, you can go with a training plan and actually get things done on the range that accelerate your progress. And that's kind of how I work with putting my training programs together, is to build training blocks that will help accelerate the progress of the guys I work with, so that they're not wasting time and doing what I call majoring in the minors on range day,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
All of us that are working that have jobs, right? When you go to the range, dude, that time is like, it ain't time for white noise. It's time to get down to business and get your stuff dialed in.
Yeah, kind of know what it's interesting, Steve. Like, you may not be, you may not see this as much as me, like from a cultural perspective, because you spend so much. It sounds like you spend so much time within the range environment. Man, I
Mm-hmm.
feel like hunters, or a big chunk of hunters, they really don't like being at the range because they're like, they only go there once, a couple times a year, and they feel out of place, and they feel very like limited what they can do. Um, and so I always, I don't know the solution to that for guys. I think this is part of it, what you're talking about. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but I think it's a real thing. The guys they just want to go to the range. And I mean, I think 80% of my clients who they go sight in, they go, all the only time they spend at a range is to go sight in their rifle a week before the hunt, and they're almost miserable doing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me give you a metaphor. Okay, so I told you I shot a lot of service rifle competition when I was active duty. That
Okay.
was in the mid '90s, and a couple of things. One, I didn't realize when I first started shooting how important the mental game was, and our command sent us to a mental management course under Lanny Basham. He was a 1972 Olympic champion, and we spent several days with him in a classroom just learning about mental performance, right? And when I came back and shot the next match, I won 2 rifles in one weekend. I went from a bronze shooter to a gold. And then a lot of things happened about the same time. Mogadishu, Somalia went down. I was on the hook for that mission, did the original workup, and then we went off of our alert cycle, and some other guys picked it up, and they ended up going over there and getting in that big 18-hour firefight. And the following year was Haiti invasion. It was going to be this big invasion of Haiti. That consumed a lot of our time. So I didn't get to shoot rifle competition, and I got real busy with life and the kids and stuff, doing other things. But I earned 26 points, excellence in competition points, and you need 30 to go distinguished with a rifle. So at almost 62, this year I'm going to go. I got my competition gun dialed in, got my new shooting coat, and I'm going to go and shoot service rifle competition because I need to win a bronze, silver, or a gold to meet one of my bucket list items, and that's go distinguished with a rifle.
Sure.
And it's just a thing, right? So what am I going to do to prepare for that? I'm going to do most of my training, Cliff, in the yard
Oh,
with
okay.
my spotting scope on a stand, with my shooting stool, with my rifle and my coat on, and I'm going to master the things I used to be really good at with regards to shooting offhand, shooting from a sitting position, and prone is a no-brainer. I did so much firing in the prone position. Yeah, that stuff comes back really fast. So take that and compare that to preparing for a hunt. If you want to win, you've got to put in the work. You got to do the recon and the intelligence gathering and know what it is that you're getting into, and that comes down to communicating with your guide, looking at the terrain, looking at the weather, talking to people that have been there before so that you know what to take and what not to take, because, I
Sure.
bet you can tell some serious stories about the yard sale showing up
Oh yeah, sure.
when guys show up with you, right? And a lot of people don't understand that ounces equal pounds, and pounds in the mountains equals misery.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Right? So that's a big thing. It's a big takeaway for anybody to take away from this conversation you and I are having right now, is that to increase your odds of success, the more training time that you put in, the higher your odds go of success, so that when you need to execute those habits, which when you started training were conscious actions, have hopefully become subconscious actions. And
Sure.
that only comes through correct repetition. And the
Yeah.
simplest way to look at that is to look at how we drive in traffic. Subconsciously, our brains are operating at a different level than they were when we had our learner's permits, all of us.
Sure.
How we react to traffic, how we brake, how we use a turn signal, how we steer, how we accelerate, all of those things. Training with a rifle to prepare for a big dollar hunt or a high value hunt where you're chasing a big monster buck that you've been chasing for several seasons or several years now or whatever, training pays off.
Right. Yeah, and it sounds like that I mean, like dry firing is a good way to get in those reps. It's an interesting one because I've had this conversation a bunch, but it's I've guided well, like the prototypical example would be an older guy comes to me. He comes to me as a client. I can specifically remember one individual that is like the perfect example, and he came and hunted with me for years. But the first time he came with me, came with a an old 30-06, an old like Tasco scope on it. Just like this old school deal.
Yeah.
And I remember the last day of a mule deer hunt that we struggled on. We finally, it was a tag that took a few points to draw, so we were being selective. We just couldn't find a deer that was very good for the area. And the last night, like 5 minutes before shooting time, a buck came out, and he wanted to shoot the buck, and it was like the only good buck we saw the whole time. But the buck was looking straight away from us on a trail, and it was about like maybe 280 yards or something like that, and the buck was just turning, looking over his butt like that. You know what I mean? Like, so the
Mm-hmm.
guy could shoot this buck in the neck about like a square like this,
Yeah.
and he was probably about 200 yards. And he said, "Oh, I can shoot him from here." And this is like all happening within like probably 50 seconds. And he shot, like just he got arrested. He did a sling thing, which I'm not real proficient at that. He got his sling on there and boom, hit this buck right in the neck and just dropped him. And I thought to myself, like, the only reason he could do that is that he grew up like hunting squirrels, shit like that as a kid. And so to him, it was totally just intuitive to do that. Whereas another guy that might be like, doesn't have 60 years of being like a good old boy around that stuff, it's really hard for him to replicate that type of experience. You know what I mean? And I think one of the only ways you can do it in an efficient way is the dry firing stuff. You know, that's a long way of getting there, but that's my thoughts on it.
No, you're absolutely right, Cliff. And I'll tell you a quick story about something that happened to us when I was on an alert cycle. My beeper went off. This was back when we carried beepers. Showing my age here. My beeper went off like 2 o'clock in the morning one morning, and I roll into work and I walk into the sniper hut, and the team chief says, I said, "What's going on?" And the other guys are rolling in right in front of me or behind me, and he goes, "Go grab your rifle and 1 round and go get on that helicopter on the pad." Like, something's going down.
Yeah.
Right? And so I went and grabbed my Win Mag, 1 bullet, grabbed my stuff, and we hauled ass out to the helo pad. There was a big MH-47 sitting there for 4 of us. Flew us down to a base in North Carolina, and it was still dark out, obviously. We got off the helo and walked over to the party that was waiting on us. They said, "Okay, guys, go over here. Here's your range brief. There's 4 targets out there. When the sun comes up, you're going to have 2 minutes to get down on the line, mill the targets, do your range estimation, and make 1 shot." And so the gist of it is that he gave the command to start the clock. Everybody made their shots. I was the last one to go, and I took too long to mill the target, and I made my shot right as he called ceasefire. So we all failed.
Yeah.
The targets were an FBI silhouette with the old black FBI targets. They have a bowling pin silhouette in the middle, and the reason that mission came about is because one of our guys was at a table doing a capabilities demonstration with a bunch of VIPs, high level VIPs, and the general in charge of us asked our guy, "What can you guys do?" And he said, "500-yard cold bore kill shots." General said, "Really?"
Show
"Yep."
me. Show me.
So that's what he did. Show me the money, right? And that's what drove that call. And we learned a really valuable lesson about that. Number one is overestimating your capabilities. So then we put up we call it a tote board in the team room with each guy's name and the day of the week. And if we went to the range that day, it was the first thing we did was make a 500-yard cold bore shot with a 300 Win Mag. And at that time, we had some pretty accurate Win Mags, and we had match grade ammo. So I think we're shooting 190 grain Lapua match bullets. And we determined that we could not guarantee that we could do a bowling pin kill shot every time at 500 yards after we watched the trend on the board. And here's the thing, measurement eliminates argument.
Sure.
Okay. Measurement eliminates argument. So we said, okay, then it's got to be 400 yards. So we had a 400-yard berm. We started doing our cold bore shots at 400. And we could not make it 100% reliable at 400 yards in all weather conditions. So then we said, okay, we've got to go to 300. So we started, and we could do it at 300 yards. And at that time, we were among the best shooters in the world, with the best equipment in the world, the best ammunition in the world.
Right.
And so that taught us a valuable lesson about overstating the capability. And and at 100 yards, you're looking at, okay, which eyeball do you want me to take out?
Right. Dude, as you described that, Steve, I felt so naive because I feel like that test aligns with like so much I feel about with hunters,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I've never done it, or I've never suggested somebody do it. But I think that's a phenomenal way for somebody to like. It's almost because I you develop this weird thing as a guide, and it's not. I think from an interpersonal perspective, it's not a good thing. And like I had guides working for me, so we would always discuss this dynamic, and that's that you have guys show up, and it's always a discussion. Like, hey, how far are you willing to shoot? And anybody that comes out of the gate with with 650, 700 yards as a guide, and sorry if this hurts your feelings, but as a guide, it's always like 250. We're getting that guy to 250 because
Right.
he's full of shit. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Because he's just
Yeah.
like I'm not saying everybody is, but statistically the guy is full of shit, and usually that indicates that we got to get them pretty close. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Because it's almost like when they say that, it triggers in my mind like, oh, okay, they don't know what they don't know, so we got to kind of baseline like our side of things. And I'm sure 1 out of 20 guys we were wrong. They're probably real proficient at that distance, but for the most part, it kind of worked out that way, right? But a lot of times I would like guys would when I ask, okay, if a guy says 700 yards, okay, have you ever shot, have you ever shot that far? And a lot of guys will say, no, I never shot that far, but at 300, I'm shooting basically a 3 MOA group or something, right? So they got like a 6 to 8 inch,
Yeah.
group they're shooting at 300. And it's like, okay, so you've extrapolated that to being able to kill an elk in the mountains at 700 yards. Like I get the logic, but it doesn't hold. But the only reason I know it doesn't hold is because I've seen it like not work in the mountains on elk. But
Absolutely.
a better solution is to be like, hey, if you want to have that competency, this should be, unfortunately, a lot of people don't have access to ranges at longer distance. But man, if you go to a range, and tell me if I'm wrong, Steve, like if you go to a range ever and you feel like you got your equipment set up, in that range you can shoot 400 or 500 yards, make your first shot out at that distance you think you can shoot. And then that might be a really good gut check. You know what I mean? If you're not hitting that steel, that 8-inch steel plate at 450 yards on that cold bore shot, then you can't shoot 450. You know what I mean? You gotta. And next time you go to the range, try it at 350 or what? I mean, is that a good way to think about it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And depending on the animal that you're going after, like say it's an elk, make your target the size of an elk's vital zone, or better
Sure.
yet, put it on a something visual, so that you can imprint on your brain where you want to hit on that in that elk's vital zone to make an ethical shot. And this is not even to mention moving targets. So
Right.
if you're fortunate enough, number one, to have a solid shooting position, and number two, to have a stationary target, what is your true capability of what is your true zero? I mean, what's
Right.
your capability at 200 yards from the seated position off of a tripod,
Right.
or or from shooting sticks, or offhand? What's your limits?
Yeah.
What are your limits? That you can make an ethical shot at any given range. And in my opinion, hunters need to be good at making offhand shots, seated shots, prone shots, and using conventional positions and unconventional positions. Like in my backyard, I don't have any neighbors in my backyard. It's goes up a hill, and it's the perfect place. I've got enough trees in my backyard to go and practice an unconventional supported position up against a tree, standing, seated, and any possible configuration of establishing a shooting position is worth dry firing. And
Sure.
it's also worth live firing. And then, because you've already went to the range and established a good baseline zero from the bench, so you know what you can do with your gun, and as long as you're consistent, that's your baseline. Right now, if you can get on an area of the range and simulate just a few of those positions and determine what your true limitations are, in my opinion, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Cliff, I think that the hunter is going to be way better off when he arrives in country, right?
Yeah,
Ready to
sure.
pack up on the horses and go in.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I think very much so, Steve. I think it's, I don't think, what we're talking about, I don't think is actually ego driven all that much. I actually think it's just being like naive. You know what I
Sure.
mean?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. Yeah.
not like I mean I don't think the average guy goes spends 8 grand on a hunt or whatever, and he wants to come up and and exaggerate how far he can shoot, and then potentially look like an idiot. I actually think people tend to want to be a little conservative, but I think they're
Sure.
just naive to it, man. You know what I mean? So if you and it sounds like such, it even sounds dumb saying it out loud, but the stuff you're talking about, people just don't do. Like the rests, man. And I mean, it's not like I haven't been guilty of it in the past either, but most of the people I think I guide, man, like probably 50% of the time they get down, they get a rest figured out on an actual animal. It's like the first time in a year they've been in that position. You,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? It sounds so crazy, but it's got it. I mean, it's a really high percentage. And the other thing about it is back to one of your original points? It's a mental issue. It becomes a mental issue because now they're really struggling. It's like I want to get prone. It's like, well, you can't get prone. You got to do it this way.
Yeah.
But they haven't practiced that, so they have no like psychological flexibility. You know what I mean, to do the exposition. So I think you're right, man. I think I mean, I think the idea of I think the combination of dry firing all the positions you're talking about, but also like doing these tests that you mentioned is an awesome concept, man. It's not that hard to do either. I don't think. I mean, you're not talking about shooting hundreds of rounds. You're saying like every once test yourself.
If you go to the range and shoot 20 rounds from a Magnum rifle, or even a 308, for example,
Yeah.
that's a lot of rounds, and some guys don't understand the limitations on the precision of their inherent precision of their gun. Let's just say a pencil barrel, fluted barrel
Mm-hmm.
rifle. A lot of guys don't understand that barrel, if it's a factory production barrel and not a custom barrel, it may not be stress relieved. And when it gets hot, their rounds are going to start opening up. The
Yeah.
groups are going to open up. The rounds are going to walk. And if they start chasing bullets, they're farting in the wind.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's, man, I mean, I've been guilty of it, so I don't have to like say it's other people, but I know other people have the same challenge, man.
We all
I
have, brother.
like it, dude. But
Yeah.
you're like I mean, I'm a big proponent of Tikas, but stock like mountain hunting oriented Tika models, you have to. I've had situations where when I was checking in reloading or checking this factory ammo versus this factory ammo, like I would have to pull the bolt out of that gun and wait like 15 minutes. You know what I mean, to shoot again. And if you're not, you're gonna get totally erroneous results. And I don't think people realize that. And I think what happens, Steve, is that hunters, at least, because we have limited time at the range, we get frustrated and then we start to shoot more. And then it's
Yeah.
like, dude, you're like beating yourself up, but also your gun, like your stainless steel Tika barrel, it's not supposed to have a whole box of 300 Win Mag shot through it in 30 minutes. It's,
That's a
I mean,
fact.
you know what I mean? Like, it's just going to be all over the place by the time. So you exacerbate everything, right? You're stressed out because what you're trying to do is not occurring. And then now your equipment's failing, but you're not going to blame it on that because you just think it's you. And it's just like, and then you go home pissed. You know?
Right, right. And here's another thing that happens, Cliff, is that some guys get infatuated with gadgets, right?
Yeah,
Let's just say a ballistic calculator of any given brand,
sure.
and look at that as a panacea that this is going to make me an expert, right?
Right.
It, whereas my mindset, based on my own experience, is okay. I'm spending a lot of money and a lot of time preparing for this hunt, even if it's a self-guided hunt, which my son Zach and I do a lot of
Sure.
self-guided hunts. I'm running an internal risk management plan. Okay. And in that risk management plan, I'm going to look at the probability of the major things that can go wrong and figure out how I can minimize those and increase my odds of making a kill shot on the first shot, hopefully, because I love elk meat so much. I don't like damaging the meat. When I
Sure.
told you about that caribou that I shot up in Alaska, the first shot, I didn't have a laser rangefinder then, and I estimated his range to be about 600, between 500 and 600 yards. It was a beautiful, clear morning. It was so clear, Cliff, that I caught the gold fleck of the bullet in mid trajectory. And my first shot hit the right below his he was laying down. There's three big bulls laying down on the side of the hill facing the sun, and the bullet hit the dirt right below him. He stood up, looked around, and he starts walking. So the second shot was a
Yeah.
mover at over 700 yards, and I gut shot him. He
Okay.
went down, and I felt bad immediately. I'm
Sure.
like, okay, increased my lead, and then I took him down on the second shot, and or the third shot rather. And that's when I learned firsthand that you know what, I got limits too. And I may be on top of my game, really, real world wise, right now, but it's not fair to the animal. It's not fair to myself. And I don't like wounded animals. And I love elk meat so much that I don't want to damage any of the meat. I like taking home the heart too.
Yeah,
I
sure.
love the heart. Right? And there's something spiritual about eating the heart, man.
Oh
Out in
yeah.
the
Yeah.
field or back at camp, right?
Yeah, I think it's wild that people leave most of them. You know what I mean? It's one of my favorites too. But let's I totally hear where you're coming from, but let's go. Well, actually, before we jump off of this, and I'm gonna ask you get back to some more like, I guess maybe more practical stuff for a hunter to
Yeah.
solve some of the issues that we've talked about. But before I go to that, I want to ask you this because I'm really curious about it within your background, the military stuff, the training stuff. You guys shoot a lot, right? And I
Yeah.
get why that would be an important part of this. Obviously, repetition is important. What do you guys do to mitigate, the effects of recoil, and then also, are you shooting different cartridges for practice versus, like actual, use in the field? I don't know, like, if you're actually going out on a mission within the military context, and I guess we could take this to the hunting world, like, should a guy be practicing with a different cartridge than he's hunting with? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. In the military, we did not. Normally, um, based on our special purpose munitions programs, we had rounds specifically developed that we use, and typically they're um, match grade law enforcement type of round. Like say, um, what's that brand? Starts with an R, Ruex or I can't remember, but they make they're a Swiss round, I believe. They make a really good match grade ammo, or
Okay,
like a
I
Hornady
got you.
tap ammo, right? So no, try not to train with ammo I'm not going to hunt with, because again, in my internal risk management plan, I want to reduce as many factors as possible and to keep things consistent so I know what my
Okay,
limits are.
so you're always using the same you're basically the same gun. Right. Now, my follow-on question is, Steve, how, because well, this is one thing I've noticed, and I want to hear your honest reaction
Yeah.
to it, because maybe what I prescribe to hunters is wrong. But one thing I hate to see is, I hate to see a guy who doesn't have a lot of time to shoot during the year, and he's coming for a big hunt, and sometimes it'll be a couple weeks out. They'll go to even maybe like a shooting class, and it could be like a phenomenal class, right? Or it could just be that a couple weeks out, they go shoot on their own, and I think a lot of guys in that short period of time, all they do is make themselves less accurate because they just beat themselves up with their guns, and they don't even
Hmm.
really realize it. So sometimes I'll actually, like, if a guy comes to me a month before the hunt and he's like, "Hey, I haven't really shot all that much. I don't have a lot of time." Usually my prescription is do some dry firing, like we talked, really get in the
Yep.
positional stuff because me and you 100% agree on that. Like,
Yeah.
all the different rests, the positions you need to dry fire that. And then I'll say, man, don't push it at the range. Just shoot. Make sure your gun's zeroed. If you can get away with your gun being zeroed with 5 rounds, all good. 3 rounds, call it a day, be confident and come, right? Now, and that's just because I worry so much about them getting beat up and showing up with like basically a flinch, right?
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
do you have any thoughts on that? I mean, can you critique what I'm telling guys? And like, how did you guys deal with shooting all these rounds and not developing a flinch?
So for us, I would say it was just the sheer number of repetitions. Like, if I was doing an intense day on the range with, say, my 300 Win Mag sniper rifle, I would shoot, but
How
I
how
would
how
walk back
how heavy was your gun, Steve?
probably about 11 or 12 pounds, I would
Okay.
say. Um, so because at the time we had only 500-yard berms, so I'd walk back from 200 to 500, and double check my dope because I had to be dialed in for specific mission scenarios,
Okay.
right? But what we did, what I did to train in the off season, or when I had the opportunity, was is I trained with a pellet rifle indoors
Okay.
in my position shooting, right, to get comfortable. Or you can do it with a 22. But that's a great point you made about overtraining prior to going out. Okay, because dealing with the flinch, a way to overcome that is you got, like I said, the 5 fundamentals I teach are position, aiming, breathing, trigger control, and follow through. And when you look at, I just redid a whole mind map on this yesterday when I was rewriting one of my lesson plans. And in follow through, or aiming rather, we've got what I call the principle of focus, where you're focused on the crosshair and making the shot. And in trigger control, my ultimate focus, and this helps avoid flinch, is on the crosshairs quartering my point of aim. I've got confidence in my zero. So I know that my point of aim is going to produce a shot at the point of impact, right? As long as I'm not even worried about conditions at this point. If I'm focused on the crosshair mentally, that squeeze, because I've done that repetition through dry fire and live fire training, that squeeze happens when my crosshair is quartering my point of aim on the target. And when that happens, my next mental action is follow through. And follow through is riding the recoil. I've got a good shooting position. The gun's seated into the buttstock, seated in the pocket of my shoulder. I make that shot and I ride it through, because mentally, the next thing that's going to happen, I'm racking the bolt and I'm looking for my second sight picture immediately. So there's no time for flinch, because I may not have taken him down with one shot and I need to get another shot on him as fast as possible.
Right.
So I've seen it on the range, exactly what you're talking about, where guys will shoot and they come off the gun immediately, right? And it's a flinch reaction. It's a natural reaction. And the way to overcome that is through intense focus on a crisp sight picture, quartering your point of aim, squeezing that trigger to make the shot, riding the follow through, and immediately looking for the second sight picture. Rack the bolt, second sight picture. Do I need to make another shot on him? He's up, he's moving. Rack the shot, go for a third sight picture. There's no time for flinching, but it takes practice.
Yeah, I get to develop that mental pathway.
Yes.
You've gotta consistently practice it. Um,
Yeah, and
yeah,
we don't have time to go into it right now, but one of the things I teach is mental checklist. Okay, until you consciously practice a mental checklist before every shot, things like round in the chamber, simple as that is, round in the chamber, weapon off safe, windage check. Do I need to make a windage adjustment? I got the right elevation on. There's the animal, and I'm running through mentally in my mind, calming my breathing down, because, dude, I get buck fever. Okay. And
sure.
buck
Yeah,
fever,
everybody does.
as you know, it's real. It's a physiological change that happens in people. And it's very similar to when a human is faced with a threat. Like, let's say police officers, this happens to a lot. They
Sure.
get into a conflict, either a physical fight or a gunfight. The heart rate is hormonally increased. It increases due to hormones, adrenaline, and whatnot. The heart rate increases, and as your heart rate increases upwards of 170 beats a minute or so, beyond that, it affects everything. It affects your breathing, it affects your vision. You get tunnel vision.
Sure.
And I experienced this last season, Cliff. The bull I killed, the young bull in antlerless season in Colorado, dude, they came out right behind me. Okay, I sat up
Okay.
on top of this hill, tucked up next to this stump, and I heard, and right before it got dark, I heard this. I'm like, no way, they're gonna come out right behind me, and like the hair was standing up on my neck, and it got louder. I'm like, they are right over my left shoulder, and I have my guns on a tripod. It's embarrassing to say, Cliff, but I killed him at 50 yards, dude, off a
Yeah.
tripod.
I mean,
Because it was the first day, man.
why not?
And an
Yeah.
elk down is a tag field.
Yeah. Yeah. Of
Right?
course. Yeah. Yeah.
And I am I
Oh
ooh,
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
oh dude, I felt it, man. I'm like, calm down.
Yeah.
Get a checklist.
I mean, I can relate, Steve. Like what's weird is I don't think people realize that guides get it too. Like when you get
Yeah.
into I totally get buck fever when I'm guiding somebody. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like if you're like, oh, okay, yeah, like here, here's the chance. I hate to even admit this, but it's an additional reason why I almost always will video shots instead of watching them through my
Yeah.
spotter. Because man, dude, because a lot of times I'll get so pumped when I'm guiding somebody that if I have my hands on the spotter, if there's any wind at all or whatever, I can miss the shot. You know what I mean? Because I'm just like I
Yeah.
can literally
Yeah.
feel my heart rate go up, and if I just put my phone on there, hit video, I just know
Yeah.
I'm gonna get it. But dude, I mean, I don't think it's hard for that to go away.
And that's the cool thing is that that's when you've got a spiritual connection to the sport and to the animal.
Yeah,
And
sure,
when I take an animal down and it's a good clean kill, it's so first thing that I learned this from a friend of mine is that the first thing I do is give thanks. I give thanks for
sure.
this animal. I give thanks for this opportunity to be in the woods with my son and to be healthy enough to do that and just be a part of the sport with such great people. It's just everything about it. And I got checked by the game warden on this last trip.
Oh, okay.
And it was perfect, man. My, scrotum was attached to the hind quarter, and everything was
Yeah,
legit.
he didn't get you on that one.
Didn't get me on nothing.
Good
And
deal.
it's like I had such a good time talking to the warden, and I made a friend. And you know what? He's the first guy I'm going to call next fall if I go and hunt in that same unit.
Oh yeah, yeah. And well, he'll remember you too. Those guys are good about that. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
No, that's
yeah,
cool. Um,
yeah,
no, I get it, man. The buck fever, I don't. It doesn't ever go away. Like the excitement of that, it might mitigate a little. It might fluctuate a little bit or whatever, but I feel like it's always there, and that's like as you allude to, that's what makes it so cool. That's probably part
and
of the
here's the
draw.
thing to remember about that is that it's not psychologically induced; it's physiologically induced with hormones. You, I don't think you can control it
Yeah,
when
sure.
it happens. Some people it happens at different states of arousal, but it's hormonally induced, brother.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's kind of interesting, and I have no evidence of this, Steve, and you could tell me I'm full of shit, but I have noticed that particularly really new hunters, I feel like women get it less than men, and I don't know why. There's a part of me that thinks there might be this, it might be a little like some convoluting factors around like men tend to associate hunting a little bit with their ego. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like if they
Yeah,
miss,
sure.
if they miss, they feel like
Yeah,
they've let the guy down. This is like a real dynamic that exists. Like you could have
yeah,
I could be guiding a billionaire, and if he misses, he's concerned about how this hunting guide views him. You know what I mean? And that's just like
yeah, yeah.
and I think sometimes that can factor into this, but in general, I found that women tend to have a little less natural buck fever, and I don't know why. you know? Guys, biltong, okay? I have been obsessed with this stuff for 3 or 4 years. Ever since I got on a keto, carnivore, paleo-esque type of diet, I've had a hard time finding healthy snacks. Biltong is a great option, particularly the slabs that have this fat on the side. That's where your energy is if you're a fat burner like me. Super simple ingredients in this, guys. Literally 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ingredients. Compare that to your gas station jerky. A great snack in the backcountry or just day to day. Biltong Depot is a huge supporter of my content. Go to their website, biltongdepot.com. Use my discount code CLIFFG, CLIFFG for 15% off at checkout and to support this content. Thanks, guys.
Well, the Russians use a lot women for sniper positions a lot.
Oh, really?
Yeah, historically they've had female snipers, and it's been my experience training women that they tend to they listen more intently, and they tend to try to muscle things around more. And it's like getting a natural point of aim when you're setting up a natural point of aim. If you're trying to hold it in position with your muscular in a muscular
Sure.
fashion, that MPA is going to change, bro.
Yeah, it's problematic. Yeah,
And if you get off the first shot, it's definitely going to change after the first shot, and
yeah.
then you got to try to come back to it. That's why the fundamentals are so important.
Yeah, for sure. So, but you've observed differences too, which is interesting. And just so Steve, just so the audience understands what you're talking about. I mean, the way I view it is like when you're shooting, and this is one of those things that I think guys that only shoot in a controlled environment, they actually never experience. Like they don't even get the concept you're talking about. They're like, well, always, like I just have it aimed. Like I lay down prone and I have it aimed. And then, and then I'm not going to shoot until it's solid. Well, then you get into a hunting, and it's like a bunch of convoluted reasons why this is, but you get into a hunting situation where it's time sensitive, and then you haven't practiced this weird angular setup, and then all of a sudden you're basically straining to keep the crosshairs on the vitals. When you shoot, it's gonna vary a little bit. This is the concept you're talking about, right?
Absolutely,
Yeah,
100%.
and it's a big one. And man, I feel like even people who know about it, including myself, in that moment, it's hard not to just say, "Oh fuck it, I'm just gonna hold it." I'm just gonna, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
I gotta shoot him. I just gonna hold the. I can't. I'm struggling. I'm just gonna struggle to hold it and pull the trigger. Um, and so it's an interesting concept that does for sure change how effective you are.
or if I hold my breath, it'll just get better because I'll be more still.
Yeah, yeah,
Wrong answer.
yeah.
You start to lose your vision at the longer that you hold your breath. That breathing cycle is important. That's why I before I'll ever go advanced with somebody, we always go back to fundamentals.
Sure.
Always.
Yeah.
Because like I said, it's this simple. That's the reason that Olympic shooters do 65% of their training, Cliff. 65% of their training is dry fire.
It's just repetition and like
That's the power of visualization and mental rehearsal. And this is, here's another quick analogy. Doing free fall parachute operations in the military. Let's say I'm doing a high altitude, high opening jump with combat equipment on oxygen. I got a lot of stuff going on. Okay. I'm
sure.
pre-breathing in the aircraft on the way up to altitude, saturating my body with oxygen. In the jump brief that we had, which we do every single time before every single jump, we go over the safety procedures. And then when I'm with my guys and we're going out to the aircraft, you get on the aircraft, on the aircraft, I'm visualizing, okay, what it feels like and what it looks like to have a high-speed malfunction. Let's say that my bag comes out and I got bag lock. I know what to do. I give my risers like 3 snaps, and it doesn't fix a problem. Look, cut away, pull.
Sure.
And the way that happens is through visualization and mental rehearsal. So it's applicable because number one, it works, but it's applicable in almost everything we do where we're trying to take conscious skills and make them subconscious actions.
Yeah, but you have to have some way to do repetition.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
it's
even
interesting.
practice in your backyard Safety first. Practice in your backyard or go to a farmer's field or something like that. If you cannot fire live rounds, go through different positions, go through
Sure.
offhand position, and go to Amazon and order some snap caps. They're
Yep.
cheap. Don't take live ammo even with you. Don't even have it with you.
Right.
Don't have it around where you clean your weapons. Be safe, right? Be
Sure.
safe, and that way you don't have to worry about it. You're confident. You're not going to hurt anybody,
Yeah, just go practice.
and you go and here's something. Here's one big takeaway from our conversation today that I would recommend for guys, Cliff, is that every time you go to the range, have a training plan of what you want to
Yeah,
accomplish,
sure.
because it will drive you to prepare mentally and physically. So when you go to the range, you're not going, okay, what am I going to do next? I'm going to take my gun to the bench, and okay, next thing you know, it's 12 o'clock, then it's 1 o'clock, and then it's 3:30, and then it's 4 o'clock, and it's time to go home.
Right. Right. It's better to have a plan and make good
Yeah,
use of the time. Yeah, no, dude, there's a lot in there, and I like that checklist concept too. Like I do one myself mentally, but it's not something I've ever really, yeah, I never really like told anybody to do that. But it's you see such weird. I've seen a lot of odd things, Steve, that have to do with that checklist. I mean, dude, at least half the time, guys will think they have a round in, and they don't. Then they got to rack around in. They think they have the safety off. They don't. A common one you pick up as a guide is guys like you start a stock and you hear their safety come off. And a good guide stops and is like, dude, put your
yeah,
fucking safety back on. Because that's how dudes
right,
get killed. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like you're in front of a hunter and so what it is like for some reason that hunter taking the safety off is not part of his shot sequence. It's like something he just ad hoc thinks about. You know what I mean? Which is that's more of a safety one. But the other ones are they lead to problems in the field. Like it's a crazy high percentage of times that a guy goes to shoot and the gun doesn't go off. You know what I mean? Like it sounds very
yeah,
basic, but it's
yeah,
pretty common. And you don't in the field. It's just 95% of the time it's like, okay, okay, and it's all good. But it's a telling factor that very few people have a protocol that they've ingrained enough to just go boop 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 boop. You know, and
right,
that's an
and
easy thing.
yeah, yeah, and until you have practiced it consciously enough, it's not going to happen subconsciously, right?
Right.
That's why. I mean, you're a pilot, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you guys use in the aircraft?
Yeah.
Checklist,
Checklist. Sure.
right?
Yep. And what's weird about it, like to extend the analogy, Steve, is like you use a checklist a couple hundred times and you know the checklist. Like as a
Right.
pilot, you still get it out and you do it because that's the
Yeah.
protocol. But I mean, these guys that fly a lot and they're checklist guys, I mean, they can be 90 years old and have the depths of Alzheimer's and not recognize their kids, and they could tell you the checklist. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's weird,
Yeah.
you
It's
know?
ingrained subconsciously.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
the
yeah.
only reason that it is because they've done it consciously so many times.
Right. Yeah,
And
yeah,
when we don't have that opportunity to do a task under similar field conditions in so many times, that's where checklists help. And that's one of the things I'm working on developing for students I teach is giving them checklists at certain points, right?
sure.
We need to be reminded of the fundamentals of marksmanship because everybody's got lives to live. And unfortunately, most of us can't make a living hunting and shooting. We've got to work, right?
Right.
And so we use things like checklists to help us stay on our game and be professional and make ethical shots out in the field.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I mean, not to take it off topic, but I have this discussion with a lot of people. Rifle hunters, they don't have the same advantages that archery guys do. Archery guys get reps in because almost anybody can shoot in their
Yeah.
backyard. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's like a
Good
thing.
point.
It's a thing that rifle guys don't. I think don't understand. And there's an element of it. Like in the end, look, if you don't want to do any of this stuff, Steve, like you don't want to do
Yeah.
anything that that I suggest, or I mean, you have a much better depth of knowledge. If you don't want to do it, it's all good. Like I can hand a brand new hunter a rifle that's set up zeroed, and he can shoot 175 yards if we got a lot of time, and
Hmm.
he's got a solid position. He's going to kill an elk every time.
Yeah.
So it's not like
I
but
agree with that.
you have to, but you just have to mitigate. You can't extrapolate, thinking that you can do something more than that unless you spend some time on these things.
You're exactly right. And I would think that as a guide, that with every client that you've got, because you care and you're so passionate about the success of that client, that you have got your own internal risk management program running.
Oh
It's
yeah.
running in your brain all the time, and you're watching him. You're watching how he carries himself, how he handles his gun, what kind of shape he's in, and you're doing everything that you can in your own risk management plan to increase his odds of success.
Oh yeah, for sure, for
Right?
sure. Yeah, and within the bounds of, and I'm sure you've dealt with this in your training in the military,
Yep.
and now you're training other folks too. Yeah, I'm sure you've dealt with this a ton, but it's all of that, but plus you intermix like the interpersonal stuff and the relationship stuff, and that makes it a
Sure.
little more complicated. But I always
Hmm.
tell people it's like, well, a good analogy is this: like I come I come and shoot with you, Steve, within 10 minutes, probably 30 minutes, you're going to know exact level I'm at. And you're going to, in your mind, you're going to make a judgment of like, wow, Cliff is way worse at this than I thought, or oh, he kind of knows what he's doing.
Sure.
It like you're I can't I'm not going to be able to fool you. You know what I mean? Like, and there's
Yeah.
no, and I think unfortunately people tend to think they can, and it's the same thing with a guide or whatever. Like, dude, you you you've seen so many folks that like the minute they pull the gun out of a case, I know a lot about where they're at. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you would judge me the same way. So I always tell guys it's like, don't ever try to fake it because it doesn't matter. Like you don't care if I suck or if I'm pretty good. You just want to make it better and kind of know where I'm at. And guides are the exact same. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like there's
Yeah.
not, but it's an odd dynamic that exists, and I always find it interesting that a lot of times people won't kind of let down their guard on hunts, let's say, until the third or fourth day, and they'll be
Yeah.
like, "Man, I actually haven't done this very much." And it's like, "No shit, dude. Like I knew that, you know what I
All
mean?" So
right.
I'm sure you run into the same thing with shooters. It's better to
Yeah.
have an open mind about it and just kind of be like, um, it's an interesting dynamic, I guess, is what we'll leave
It
on that.
is yeah. It's great. I love training people. It's what I do. When my last operational deployment was in between 2002 and 2003, and I didn't get to go to Afghanistan. I had some very unique skills as a forward air controller, and so my CO asked me to go do this mission with the commander of the battle carrier battle group in the Eastern Med, and I did. But it got me a ride in an F-15. That was really cool.
Cool.
When I was doing the workup for training the pilots, dropping bombs and stuff, I got a ride in North Carolina in an F-15E. That was the coolest thing I've ever done. But when I retired, I really got into training people, and I retired for a reason, like I said, to be at home with my boys. I got to train my boys, I got to train individuals, and it just got a really keen and cool sense of reward from training people that want to be trained,
Sure.
right? That are into it. And when you're a trainer, you can recognize immediately if somebody doesn't really want to be there, and that changes the dynamic.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that's who I work with is people that want to be there and want to get good, and they care about killing an elk or doing better in competition or just knowing their stuff with guns so
Yeah,
they can be
sure.
safer and more efficient, right? And they don't look like a jackass on the range in front of their friends.
Sure. Yeah, I mean it's
You know,
yeah.
it could be something as simple as that, but that like you're saying, that level of humility in like if I were to come and go hunt with you, dude, I would be a sponge. I want to know, I want to listen to everything that you're telling me, and I want to absorb as much knowledge as I can from you, because if I do, I'm skill stacking,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
sure. Sure.
and we're going to build a relationship. And I'm like, dude, I got to hunt with Cliff Gray, man. And I learned a lot of shit from him.
Yeah, and it's interesting, man, because I feel the same way. Like I had mentioned to you early on that I've been to kind of some shooting schools that were taught by probably similar background to
Sure.
you, and then some hunting
Yeah.
guys and different. And I think within that, I try to have the same perspective. Like I'm gonna try to learn something from all these guys. And what it used to frustrate me at the beginning, and now I think I understand it a little bit more, is there's a lot of things that one guy might say, and then you go listen to the next guy, and it clashes with the first guy, and then you have in my I think a lot of people, including myself, you want to kind of write it all off, and it's like, nah, man, you're still, like you say, stacking knowledge, right? They might have
Sure.
that perspective because they had a different angle at it or whatever, but it all helps in the end. Like I think sometimes it can be, and dude, hunting guides are the worst about that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you could be hunting with me, and I could have a perspective of like, this is how I would hunt this area, and then you could hunt with a guy who like works with me or I know really well, or like you'd think we have the same technique and strategy, and like the guys have a totally different perspective on it. You know what I mean? But you can learn, you can learn from both. It's not
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
it's
Absolutely.
it's, you can't write it all off, or you just be frustrated with trying to improve. Um,
Absolutely.
but anyway, Steve, I'm gonna let you go, but I've got to ask you a couple questions that maybe you've got some interesting insight in. Is there any gear or anything like that, maybe from your military background or not, that you use while you're hunting or shooting that other folks don't?
I would say, I mean, I definitely use a tripod because I don't mind carrying the extra weight, and I try to stay in shape to do that.
Let's dig into that a little bit, Steve. What kind of head do you put on it?
I use my favorite one is the big photographer. I can't remember the photographer's ball head, but I've been using a Kopfjäger swivel ball head and a Vortex swivel ball head mounted to an Arca rail adapter. So the adapter I use is from the photography industry, and that just fits onto my tactical stock on my 300 Win Mag, and that's what I use primarily. And if I've got terrain that will allow a prone shot, then I'll use my bipod. As far as specialized equipment, my son is really good with Onyx. But
Yeah,
the way that I look at it from growing up in special operations is the phone has a battery, and if
sure.
that battery goes down, and I don't know how to use my altimeter, my compass, and map, and I don't know where I'm at, or it's dark, I'm shit out of luck. And so I tend to take a hard copy map with me. I always take my compass, and I've got a watch or my Kestrel, which has an altimeter, so that I can navigate in steep country, just terrain navigation using an altimeter. But as far as any unique gear,
I mean,
no,
I would call that fair. Like even that stuff's fairly unique, Steve. And your Kestrel you're using for getting environmentals on shots and that sort of thing, right? Is that the same? It's like a wind indicator Kestrel. Is that what you're talking about?
yeah, yeah.
And then in that altitude on there, from a navigation perspective, this is going to tell you how naive I am to this, but it's pretty accurate.
Yes.
Okay.
That as long as you're not getting a weather front moving in, which is going to affect any barometer driven,
Yeah.
pressure driven instrument, but it's pretty accurate. I also have an old Swiss altimeter, dial altimeter, that I carry sometimes, and it's extremely reliable. And if you can read a map and read contour lines, and you can recognize features that they're moving across, you can navigate with just a map and altimeter, and just knowing, you know, general cardinal directions. The
Sure.
compass always helps, of course, but I'll never go in the field without a survival kit. And there is a pattern that I teach, the pattern for staying alive. And I teach that in my survival classes. And that pattern for staying alive is going to depend on what the threats are, what the priority of threats are, and threat being weather, environment, temperature. Um, if I'm going into how it gets during elk season, especially like third rifle or even first rifle for that matter. If you don't have redundant ways to build a fire,
Sure.
you might be a casualty waiting for a place to happen.
Right.
If you don't have a first aid kit and something happens in the backcountry, you might be a casualty looking for a place to happen. If you fall into in between some rocks and break your fib tib or your femur, and you have no way to signal, you might be a casualty looking for a place to happen.
Sure.
Right. So the survival kit is first and foremost, navigation being secondary, and then my shooting gear pretty much being tertiary.
Right. I gotcha.
Yeah,
No, that's all good stuff, man. Do you use your tripod to glass off of too, or is it primary purpose for shooting?
I use my tripod to glass off of as well. Um, whatever is the best support that I can get for glassing. But if I might also carry a really small, super lightweight tripod just for glassing.
Yeah, I gotcha.
Right. But my heavier tripod, I use a Coffeeegger tripod. It is primarily for my gun because I hunt with my rifle's heavier than most people because I use a tactical rifle hunting for a couple of different reasons. And number one is my confidence in my ability
Yeah.
to place an accurate shot.
Man, I mean,
For,
I mean that's another good one to mention, Steve. Like, and I could be naive, man, but the vast majority of people with your background, they're willing to carry a heavier rifle.
yeah,
I mean, I don't know very many exceptions to that. You know, I mean, off the top of my head, I don't know anybody. You know what I mean?
but it's not for everybody.
No, yeah,
You
I
know,
totally, yeah, yeah,
I mean, you've got to spend a lifetime, an adult lifetime, staying in shape and creating a muscular structure. And if you have no other disabilities, right? I mean, in 23, Zach and I went into the women ooch and we went self-supported, dude. And he wanted to go way back in there. I'm like,
sure,
have you weighed your pack before we even launched? And when we met at our staging area, I brought a hanging scale from Amazon. And when he had his pack loaded up, I said, go out there and weigh that pack. And it weighed in at 85 pounds, right? And we're
That's-
going in by foot. Well,
yeah,
guess what? We trimmed and trimmed and trimmed and trimmed.
sure,
My pack still weighed about 80 pounds going in. And that didn't include my rifle, didn't include my bino harness. And so I've got this heavy pack, and we were only able to hike in about half as far as we thought we were able to.
yeah. You just
And
kind
I'm
of
telling him,
calibrate it.
yeah. And I'm telling the old, I'm like, dude, I'm 60 years old, man. You know, I don't
Yeah,
need a kick in the nuts like this. I
yeah,
said,
sure,
I want to go on the guy's back on a guy's horse, get my stuff packed in
sure,
or go to a lodge, go out hunting in the morning and have a cocktail in the evening.
yeah,
But I go with him because sometimes the best way to learn is by experiencing these things yourself.
yeah. Of
And it was
course.
a good learning experience for him and I both. And the bonding time, irreplaceable, dude. I mean,
Oh
just
yeah,
when
yeah,
when
epic.
you're when you're embracing the suck and paying the man and humping, and he's telling me, he's like, Dad, you gotta stay out there till dark. He goes, and not dusk. He goes, pitch black. He goes, you blast until it's pitch black.
I like
You
it.
got 30 minutes until after the sun goes down, after nautical twilight, to make a shot. He goes, pitch black, Dad. I'm like, I'm proud of that kid, man.
That's awesome. No, that's good
Yeah.
stuff, dude. I love it.
Yeah.
But within all that, still, you're willing to carry a couple extra pounds of a rifle, and like that's just pretty normal. You know, for guys
Yeah.
that feel pretty comfortable shooting further, you tend to see that. You know.
So when I'm physically training for hunting season, I don't run anymore, but I'll do a lot of walking, and I just carry 2 5-pound kettlebells.
Okay.
And I get used to carrying those 2 5-pound kettlebells. I'll do when I'm walking and jamming to some tunes. I'll do curls with those 2 kettlebells, do chest lifts, shoulder lifts, and just work them and make sure that I'm used to carrying that weight. But what you cannot do, I wouldn't recommend anybody do, is not train and then show up for hunt season and expect to carry heavy gear into the field.
Yeah. It's just miserable. It's like it's exponentially worse than showing up with brand new hiking boots. You know what I mean? Like it's just
Yeah.
it's the same concept. It's just like, look,
Yeah.
body's not your body's not ready for it. And I've noticed as I've gotten older, Steve, I've become more that way.
Sure.
If I cheat on that a little bit, I get specific types of pain. And I'm sure they're, I'm sure they're little, injury, abuse injuries that are like manifesting themselves. Like I get really bad rhomboid pain if I'm not
Yeah.
like up to speed and on backpacking and stuff. It's become worse when I've gotten older. But I mean, regardless of your age, like you got to go, deal with a little weight and be prepared that way. Dude, I'm gonna ask one more question. Are you good on time, Steve?
Yeah, I'm good on time.
All right, man. This is one I wanted to ask you on like your military perspective. What
Mhm.
is there anything like skill set wise? It could be even psychological things or whatever that you've noticed out of the military side of things in the training that those guys have and you have that hunters are not good at or could improve.
I would say two things, and that's training and preparation.
And kind of discipline around that.
Yeah, yeah. Focus. Number one, like I said, knowing what your mission is. What do you intend to do? Do you intend to go with a guide who's going to carry everything? How far are you going to travel on foot? What altitude are you going to be hunting at? How are you surviving? How are you living? Um, and when they don't have the experience behind them to sort through these things mentally and kind of do their own mission plan, they're kind of showing up unprepared. And so I would say that those are probably the two things, because if a hunter who's take what he's doing seriously and he kind of does his own intelligence gathering and looks at the terrain where he's going and not depend completely on the guide to hold his hand ahead of time, that's probably one of the biggest things. And this is especially critical if you're planning on doing a self-guided hunt,
Sure.
right? You've got to consider things like primary and backup communications, putting a trip plan together, equipment load, loading your gear out well before the season,
Yeah.
and practicing with it, doing all the things we talked about with like dry fire, setting up camp, sorting out, getting rid of ounces so that ounces don't turn into pounds.
Yeah.
Your
It
survival skills.
yeah, for
It's
sure.
training and preparation, Cliff. I think
Yeah,
those are the
yeah.
two big things.
Yeah, which it's interesting that that's how you answer that question, man. Like basically just having a structure around things. Because you know where I see that, amongst friends and family I have that are military guys, I see that same analogy in business. Like entrepreneurs who
Sure.
have a military background, they're tend to be more structured and like they have a structure to it. And this is just something I've observed. Whereas like guys without that background, they tend to be a little more ad hoc. So it's in the business world too. It's interesting. It must just be that the guys with your type of training, that's pounded in early on. Like this is how you do stuff.
So before we had high speed mission planning software on computers and stuff like that, in the SEAL teams, we were taught a process called phase diagramming. And every mission basically had 5 phases. You had insert, infill, actions on the objective, exfil, and extract. And then a sixth one was contingency. Okay, so we would look at each phase of the mission, and typically not really talking about the global war on terror, but prior to that, going in and doing things like a special reconnaissance where you had to sneak in without getting caught, go do your mission, and get out without being caught or seen or busted in any way. You look at each phase of what you're doing and say, what are the three most probable things that could go wrong? And developing a counter plan, a mitigation strategy for each one of those three things, and eliminating that and moving on to the next phase, right? And so for a self-guided hunt, for example, one phase could be insertion, driving from here to Idaho,
Sure.
right? What are the three things that could go wrong? Getting to your staging base, once you get in state, what are the three things that could go wrong? What am I not going to have that I will need?
Right.
Um, Going into the field, what are the three things that could go wrong? So again, it's part of that planning and preparation process, and you don't need a computer to go through that. You can do it with a
Right.
pad paper and pencil.
Yeah. And I think like within the hunting context, like the example you just used, the three biggest things are pretty obvious. You know what I mean? And it's
Yeah.
crazy because if you think about them, like the one that pops in my mind on your first example is okay, we're driving from Ohio to Colorado. It's four buddies. All right. And then they do that and they don't plan for what if one guy can't show up last minute or one guy craps out on the trip, right? I can't tell you how many guys have not planned for that contingency. They drive all the way to Colorado and they turn around because one guy's wife tells them that she's going to divorce him. And it's like, you guys didn't plan for that shit? You know what I mean? Like,
You
that's
got a
like,
green light for all seasons from now on.
yeah. But you know what I mean, Steve? It's like,
Yeah.
just what you're talking about. They just plan like, hey man, there's four of us. Let's just take two vehicles. Let's take two vehicles so we cover that one. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
it's gigantic to this world. Like it's just a little bit of like looking at what can arise.
And think about how catastrophic that could of a problem that could be to start your trip off.
Oh yeah, dude. And I'm giving you that example because I've seen it happen like a dozen times.
I believe you.
You know what I mean? Like it's like it's not like, no, because it ruins everybody else's deal. All it takes though is like a thought, like just that's an obvious thing, right? Group,
Yeah.
some guy might have a problem. That's going to be in like your first issues,
Yeah.
So no, I think that's a great piece of advice, man. I've never really thought about it in that way, but even that like applying literally that system is awesome prep for guys. But no, I love it, dude. Steve, thanks so much for your time, man. Where can people follow you? Tell us about your business, all that good stuff.
Sure. So I'm here based out of Knoxville, Tennessee. I do a lot of training here in Tennessee, South Carolina, North Carolina, Southwest Virginia. I can work with private clients depending on what they need, and I do that. And I've got a website that's under construction right now, manofwartactical.com. It should be done within the next 30 days. People can find me there. Just go to manofwartactical.com, sign up for my email list, know that I email often, and that I want people on my list who are motivated to learn, right? So if you are one of those guys and you think that all you've got to do is spend a few bucks here and there and it's all going to come to you, it doesn't happen. It doesn't work for me. And so that's who I want to work with. And I appreciate you having me on, Cliff. And that's how people can find me, manofwartactical.com.
Cool, dude. For sure, man. You'll see my name pop up on the newsletter, dude. So thanks a lot, Steve. I appreciate it, man.
Hey, you're welcome. Thanks for having me, Cliff. Take care, brother.
If you enjoyed this content, do me a huge favor. Subscribe on whatever platform you consume it on. Spotify, Apple, YouTube, whatever works for you guys. Everything else is on my website, pursuitwithcliff.com. Go there and it's going to be very apparent to you that I work my ass off just to not have a real job. All the hunts I guide, all the seminars I put on, all the unique experiences I offer, and the membership site, all the details are there.